Okay, so I wanted to make a short video talking about plants and their growing habits, specifically about their ability to survive certain adverse climate conditions. And what brought me to talk about this was that we just had a little frost recently, and a bunch of plants just got damaged real bad. And I wanted to show you guys a little bit of that. This is just my raspberry plant. The bush there in these two containers, they don't spread out, but they're doing really nice. They got tons of flowers on them. And these guys, as far as I can tell, they've got a little bit of this leaf problem on them where like the tips, it's almost like the tips got burnt and then they kind of just stick together and they won't quite grow out all the way they're supposed to. Other than that, this guy's doing great. There's tons of new growth coming up out of the bottom here. Tons of flowers. But the frost didn't really affect it at all. And I've got this blueberry here. Blueberry's doing amazing. I decided to let it flower even though this is its second year that I've had it. First year in the ground. I put it in the ground back in January maybe February. I can't remember off the top of my head. And despite the recommendations, I'm just letting it flower. I just want to see how it does. This guy completely unaffected by all the frost. I've had stuff trying to grow out of the tips of these since October or November. We had a warm spurt in November, and so some stuff started growing out of here. There's still leaves from it that you can see right there. Still leaves right there. It had been trying to flower since then, and as far as I can tell, all these guys they're alive, they're open, they're ready for pollination, and then obviously fruit afterwards. And it's just trucking along just amazingly, completely unaffected. I got some more over here. Thimbleberry, completely unaffected. It didn't flower this year because it's still too small, but unaffected. Trailing blackberry, unaffected, doing great. Still got leaves on it. This guy, they don't really lose all their leaves, from what I can tell in the winter. They just kind of go red. And then they flower, and then they die, as all blackberry raspberries do. But then if I come over here to this other guy, Pomegranate had this issue back in, February when I got it, but was pretty much unaffected by this last frost that we had, which actually surprises me to begin with. It's kind of an outlier to this video that I'm making. But then we look at this guy. This is my kiwi. It's been a couple days. It was Wednesday or Thursday that this happened, and it was 2 days in a row that we had light frost. It just got damaged real bad, and that's because we had a frost too late or because it leafed out too early. It was already leafing out when I bought it. Because it's not always very easy to find certain more exotic plants or just ones that are harder to come across. This is a Kiwi grape, self-fertile variety. And Kiwi grapes are supposed to be cold hardy, hardier than normal fuzzy kiwis. But it got hit by the frost real bad. A bunch of these leaves are looking kind of weird. And then these tips here are the ones that just got hit the worst by it. They're all crumbled. There are some flowers on it somewhere. Let's see if I can find some here. Some flower buds there. Don't know if they'll make it. They don't look like they were affected at all. A couple of them, maybe. So we'll see how they do. I need to get a trellis for this to start growing up. But you can just kind of see it was damaged real bad. And that's part of which, despite the fact that this is one of the warmest zones that it's supposed to be able to grow in, it just got damaged by that frost. Why was it damaged by that frost? Well, the blueberries, the raspberries were pretty much unaffected by it. I got an elderberry here. This specific variety is bred from a subspecies that is not native to here, but elderberries themselves are native to this area. Different subspecies are native to this area. And there's a little bit of a yellowing on some of these smaller leaves, but I don't know if that's from the frost or not. I see no other visible damage on it. It's doing great. It's nice and happy where I put it. All of my wild strawberries You know, I've got 2 subspecies that are native to a little bit farther up north. I've got 2 that are native to this, or actually all 4 of these are native to this area, just different subspecies, different species, and they're doing great. And the frost does not affect these guys at all. Like all these flower buds that are open right now, not on this one, but over here on this guy here, this one tries to flower year round all the way into the winter. You know, it could be December and you could see flower buds on it trying to open up. This guy was doing the exact same thing, and the flowers are pretty much unaffected by the frost even. You know, they don't get damaged at all. If the flowers will survive into spring when it's warm enough for them to actually grow, you could get fruit off of them. Well, not this one because it's not self-fertile, and this one because it's not self-fertile, but you know what I mean. But then if we go over here, last example here, over here to this guy here, here's my grape. Now, grapes are in a similar situation to elderberries, where grapes, there are wild grapes that are native to North America, but this variety, I believe, is primarily a member of the European grape species. It might be crossbred a little bit with some American wild grapes. I know that they did a lot of breeding, but it's principally a table grape. And it got hit by that frost. I'm seeing some weird coloring on these leaves. I'm gonna have to look at it a little bit, but you can see the tips here that got kind of burnt. It wasn't as bad as the kiwi, but it still got damaged. And here I'm trying to do my best to kind of replicate natural environment, and that doesn't necessarily mean growing in a forest, but it means replicating environmental factors that apply to where perennials grow, and that's they have a large amount of dead plant litter on the ground that insulates the ground, keeps it moist, constantly fertilizes the soil to try to give it, you know, the most ideal environment. But there's several factors that we can never really adjust for perfectly. There are some that we can, like being able to put them in temporary greenhouses or insulate them from environmental factors, but those factors will always be there. They need to be protected from, as opposed to, you know, I mulch the ground and then 90% of my watering is covered for the year because it doesn't evaporate. But, you know, I got these guys in pots so that I can move them around and I can more easily manipulate them. Some of you guys already know that I've got some experiments that I'm doing with them, so I need to be able to move them around when I need to, for whatever reason. This guy looks like he's almost ready to come out of the bag. But effectively, these guys are from this climate, this area. It's not. I don't think it's about necessarily the zones, because these are scientifically determined to be able to grow in the same zone that we live in. I think it's that all the other microscopic factors that people don't really account for contribute to it not being able to survive these adverse climatic abnormalities that the native plants can. And so this guy might be able to grow in this zone, but where it grows natively might not have the same abnormal conditions on a regular basis. So late frosts, which is what, you know, the video is kind of about, it might not be able to handle these late frosts, whereas, you know, North America is known for having climate extremes since the colonial period. It gets extremely cold and dry in the winter and extremely hot and dry in the summer, and then especially in the spring and fall we have very heavy rain seasons here in Oregon, and the plants are just kind of adapted to being able to handle those abnormal stresses that, you know, for example, in Europe, if we're talking about grapes, as far as I know, Europe is a lot more of a mild climate with a mild year, much more consistent temperatures, albeit fluctuating because it is in the northern hemisphere. It's not near the equator. So that's just kind of what I've been thinking about. That's one of the advantages of not just growing plants that grow well in your zone or trying to mimic natural environments, but if you can find the plants that are most well adapted to your climatic area, you can have the most success with how they grow. And the abnormal factors that they can survive in. Oh, I got a spit bug there that I'm gonna have to take care of. I haven't had much problem with aphids. The only thing I've seen my out of my plants that have had aphid problems right now has been a dwarf rose. They just seem to love that. But my strawberries have had like very few aphids on them, and I spray them whenever I see them. But it's been the spittle bugs. I've seen more spittle bugs, or whatever those things are called, than really anything else this spring so far. But that's what I wanted to talk about. I hope you guys have some thoughts on that. You know, I'm not a plant professional per se. I've never studied a lot of this stuff. This is just kind of what I've observed from these guys over this last spring that I thought I'd kind of share with you and see what you think. So I hope you enjoy.